Lenore Walker's cycle of abuse. To create her theory, Lenore Walker used the statements of battered women. Lenore Walker's cycle of abuse theory states that there are 3 phases in all abusive relationships. This researcher psychologist has studied this form of abuse for over 40 years. He believes that it is possible to eliminate abuse. He also helps abused women defend themselves and fight for justice. According to Walker, victims do not disclose their abuser publicly because they are afraid. They are afraid that things will get worse, especially when they are financially dependent on their abuser. Walker has contributed a very useful tool to the psychology behind gender violence. This tool enables us to understand how abused women suffer. Walker also helps us understand how difficult it is for battered women to leave their abuser. He published the conclusions of his theory in 1979. To create his theory, he used the statements of battered women. Through her research, Walker found that these women are not attacked at the same time or in the same way. However, the phases are the same. Although some phases may last long or manifest themselves in different ways, they always appear clearly. He established a comparable pattern of behavior in all situations of abuse, and he observed how these patterns of behavior recur in a cycle. In this way, Walker's cycle of abuse helps us understand relationships with abuse. Recent research explains that it is almost impossible to break out of this cycle of abuse, as it is almost impossible to escape. The consequences for the victim of violence are serious. The outcome can sometimes be fatal. Gender violence involves the loss of personhood. This loss includes biological, psychological and social factors. Cycle of abuse, phases of abuse. Here, we will talk about Walker's cycle of abuse. This is one of the most widely held theories about the stages of an abusive relationship. Phase, with build-up of tensions. In this phase, there is a gradual escalation of tensions. Walker characterized this by an occurrence of continuous problems and violent acts. This phase does not necessarily have a specific duration. It can last for weeks, months or years. Throughout this phase, there are instances involving jealousy, yelling, or petty arguments. The victim interprets these insults and verbal abuse as isolated incidents that are under control. The addict experiences sudden mood swings and becomes angry over insignificant things. They are often tense and or irritable. The victim tries to mitigate the circumstances. They don't want to make things worse. They believe that if they try to make the abused fall down, it will end in a conflict. The victim tends to blame himself for what is happening and justify the abused's behavior. Every time there is a case of minor aggression, the tension will increase in the addict. The apparent passivity of the victim worsens the condition of the abuser, who makes no attempt to control his emotions. Acute violence. This is the shortest of the 3 phases. Violence breaks out at this stage. There is a lack of control which causes the physical, psychological and or sexual violence to occur. The victim experiences distrust and anxiety, and they feel like isolating themselves. They may feel powerless over what has happened. They usually wait several days before seeking help. The phase of reconciliation, sweet bread days. In this phase, the abuser usually asks for forgiveness and promises the victim that it will never happen again. They use manipulative strategies to make sure the relationship doesn't end. When the victim accepts gifts, invitations, or promises, this does nothing but reinforce the abusive behavior. The tension that built up and the phase of acute violence has disappeared. In this phase, it is difficult for the woman to report the situation they are going through. The sudden change in attitude makes them believe that it was a one-off and that it will never happen again. The victim wants to believe that the abuser will never do anything like this again. The fact that the addict seems calm reinforces the belief that they can change. Their loving behavior is proof of this. This reconciliation phase ends as soon as small incidents begin again. Any time during the day and night is good enough to say enough and a stage in your life you wished you hadn't lived through. Raymond D. Penafla. How can you break a cycle of abuse? To break the cycle of abuse, the victim must be aware of their situation. From this point, the victim can begin to receive emotional and professional help. In recent times, much light has been shed on this problem. We have found that this problem is more widespread and common than previously thought. Society has responded with legislative reservations. However, we are far from having eradicated this form of violence. Be calm, polite, follow the law, respect everyone, but if anyone lays his hand on you, send him to the graveyard. Malcolm X.